my 40 years as a philosopher, of course I started out trained in the European logic, and I hadn't been to India, for example, even though that was my family heritage. And so when I came to Haverford College in '68 with my doctorate and writing my dissertation on the evolution of logic in European from Aristotle to the modern mathematical logic that dominated the modern 20th century at that time. There was a revolution in mathematical logic which simply displaced the old logic. I looked at both of them and I discovered that they both had great powers. You can't just throw one out or the other, and yet they repelled each other. So there was a split in logic. And I realized if there's a split in logic, and logic is the science of consciousness and reason, then reason is split. And if reason is polarized, it opens up the doors to relativism, anything goes, which is what Socrates got hemlocked for. Because sophistry was that there was no fundamental truth, it was all relative. And Socrates said, no, in my heart I knew there's a basic truth. He didn't know what it was. So now we're facing our modern 21st century version of relativism, or is there any fundamental truth across our different worlds? So my own career, my journey, your question is excellent, was when I went to India in crisis in 1971 for the first time, not thinking I was going to do philosophy. And I went there naively to lecture on my sense of the crisis of logic in the European tradition, which of course in India they wanted to hear, that the Europe was in a crisis. They welcomed that. And I went there to study sitar and tabla, the drums, and to steep myself in the culture. But inadvertently I started studying Indian philosophy at the university and read the Bhagavad Gita for the first time and was stunned at what I discovered. Because if you read the Gita, you see Krishna, the high voice, speaking from Om, speaking to Arjuna, the warrior, in a war with his own family, who's broken down on the battlefield. And it starts out, and then Krishna tries to show him that, Arjuna, you're in the ego mind. That's why you're in this war. Do you realize that? Your life has imploded in a midlife crisis because you are ego-minding. Let me teach you the way of the yoga. And all of the yoga ways were to go into meditative consciousness, to enter into the integral holistic space, which I call the dialogue space. Because when you're in the unified field of the yogic mind, and you're in the space of Om, where everything is interconnected, you're experiencing your connectivity with everything else. And so that was a revolution in my life. When I came back to Haverford College in 1972, after 1 year in India, encountering Buddhist philosophy, which was a different version showing when Buddha woke up, he saw that the ego is to suffer. We have a choice, we don't have to do that. We cling to the ego, that's the reason. We are egoholics, so to speak, we're addicted to ego patterns. We have a choice, and if we exercise that choice, we could rehabilitate our minds in the ways of mindfulness. That was Buddha's teaching. Coming back from India after encountering Hindu thought and Buddhist philosophy, it shook my world because no one ever taught me that there's such a thing as ego-minding. I was steeped in that all my life. That's all I knew. So when I came back to Haverford in 1972 with this whole new possibility that could meditative intelligence help us to go into a place, a deeper place, right, that might solve my crisis, that what I discovered in logic, could there be a deeper integral logic? So when I came back to Haverford, I said to my colleagues, I want to start teaching Hindu thought and Buddhist thought. And they allowed me, even though I'm there as a logician, trained in analytic philosophy. And I started teaching Hindu thought and Buddhist thought, but I was getting sick because I was teaching it in the same ego space that I knew, the only thing I knew. And it was not resonating. I knew I was violating the Hindu tradition and the Buddhist tradition because the essence of those traditions was saying, don't ego, step outside the box, go into the deeper space. So if you're going to go with Krishna and read the text authentically, which is what we want to teach our students, how to authentically read texts and honor them in their own right. And I realized that if I was teaching it in the ego space, I was violating the text. So it really called upon me to pause after 1 or 2 years of failure, feeling this is not working. You're not talking about Buddha or about Krishna. You want to help the students experience this meditative transformation into the deeper space, which is the essence of the text. So I had to redesign teaching from the ground up. And it took me 20, 30 years to do that. That's where I am now. So in my own personal journey, the micro of my own journey, and then seeing that the whole planet needs to understand how to move into this deeper space. Saying you can't objectify the law, you've got to live it. So what became clear to me over decades of work was to pioneer this deeper, what I call global lens, the global mind, the deep space, the missing grammar of logos. I use the word logos, taking the Greek word meaning word, speech, mind, reason, and realizing that Lao Tzu, the Tao of Chinese, and Om of India, and the Shunyata of Buddha, and the Yahweh of the Judaic, and the Christ, and the unified field that Einstein was trying to find and science was trying to tap. We're all trying to get into this deep logos, the unified field, going into this deep space where everything is interconnected. That's where we become human. That's what our teachers were calling us to. But humanity is still caught in this ego-mental space. It dominates us in every way, and it's generating the crises that we face. So the exciting thing and the dangerous thing now in the 21st century is that we're at a tipping point. We can't keep on going. It's unsustainable. After centuries, the ego-mental culture has reached its limit. It's peaking as we speak, so it's getting worse. But the people are ready. As you point out, there's a readiness in the life of the people at the grassroots level. They know there's a deeper way. Science is going into non-locality, the butterfly effect. All of those new concepts are tapping the unified field. So it's a very exciting time. And that's what SEED is about. I hooked up with Glenn about 5 years ago when he called me to give a keynote. And that's what I did. The keynote here in Albuquerque was to present the double brackets. And the single bracket says, we need the missing grammar, the deep logos of deep dialogue, in order to have a dialogue here between the indigenous wisdom, with all of its diversity, and the languages of science. In its diversity, there is a common ground, but we have to hold the space of deep dialogue. So SEED is a wonderful venue of a very high order, where the practitioners sitting around this table are year after year deepening the skills of learning the art and the art form of deep dialogue. And it's beginning to happen more and more. Global dialogue is really recognizing that across worlds and worldviews. That's the word global. I know global means many things right now, global economy and a global village, but really from the philosophical point of view that of our institute, global means bringing and recognizing different worldviews. So global dialogue is bringing to the radar, to front and center, how is it possible? Is it possible to cross worldviews and communicate truly and deeply across worlds? And so my institute, Global Dialogue Institute, has really developed into a fine point what we call deep dialogue, which requires each participant to realize, let me check out my lens, and to realize that if I simply interpret the other through my lens, uncritically, I could be violating them. So how do I step back from my lens, dilate my mind and heart a bit, to open space, to move into the world of the other, to see it from their point of view. And if we can do that, there's a dilation of my consciousness, which I call opening the global mind, the global lens, in which now I begin to become more capacitated to see alternative worlds at one moment. When that happens, I'm in a deeper place. I'm in a deeper process. I'm entering the global world. And that's what our institute is attempting, to help people across the planet gain skills and literacy in global dialogue.